A simple conclusion from my 230-plus stroke research papers Part 2, number 1565, the 8th of March 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category, stroke summary. Future protection strategy. Because the structural damage to my blood vessels cannot be fully reversed, my future protection must focus on controlling the trigger factors, namely blood pressure spikes. However, simply watching aggregate blood pressure data has limited value for my stroke prevention. The most important trigger in my case is acute hypertension. To detect these sudden events, I now measure my blood pressure about 20 to 24 times daily. From these measurements of SBP, DBP and HR, I calculate for extended BP biomarkers. 1 pulse pressure PP equals SBP DBP. To mean arterial pressure map equals DBP plus PP 33 SBP spike equals highest SBP average SBP for strike risk triggering sensitivity index TSI equals PP 45 SBP 120 100. All four extended values are calculated and displayed instantly on my iPhone screen after the three primary BP data SBP, DBP, HR are entered into my customized medical AI software. The TSI index combines systolic blood pressure and pulse pressure to estimate the mechanical stress acting on the vascular system. WHE and TSI rises toward a dangerous range. It warns me that my vascular system may be approaching a risky state. By observing this warning signal, I can immediately respond by reducing stress, stopping emotional conversations, performing breath-in exercises, inhaling for 4 seconds and exhaling for 8 seconds, resting, or adjusting my daily activities. In this way, TSI functions as an early warning indicator that helps me immediately control the mechanical load acting on my cerebral vessels. Therefore, my daily survival strategy is to carefully monitor my blood pressure and avoid situations that may cause sudden pressure spikes, especially emotional stress. For my personal case, I simply need to ensure that my TSI value remains below 100. When my TSI exceeds 120, it indicates that I may be entering a dangerous condition. It should be noted that the TSI proxy was developed primarily for my personal preventive monitoring and is not intended to serve as a clinical guideline. Vascular systems vary due to age, vessel stiffness, diabetes history, baseline blood pressure, vascular calcification. So a personalized threshold makes sense. For example, on the day of my stroke, June 21, 2025, my SBP reached 175 mmHg and my DBP was about 125 mmHg, resulting in a pulse pressure PP of 50 mmHg. 175/125 equals 50. Based on my personal TSI formula, my TSI value should be TSI equals PP 45 SBP 120 100 equals 1.111 1.458 100 equals 162. This extremely elevated value indicates a very high level of vascular stress at that moment. Different patients will naturally have different baseline blood pressure patterns, vascular conditions, and metabolic histories. Therefore, the amplification factor 100 in my personal model and the reference thresholds may need to be adjusted for each individual patient. Conclusion: after completing 258 research papers over 253 days following my stroke, I can now summarize my case in a simple and direct way. The primary root cause of my stroke was long-term obesity leading to type 2 diabetes. Most of the vascular damage energy accumulated during the first 20 years 1990 to 2009 of poorly controlled diabetes when my condition relied mainly on medications. During the following 16 years 2010 to 2025 of strict lifestyle management without medications, the additional vascular damage accumulated much more slowly, contributing only about 9% of the total stroke energy, roughly 1/10 of the level observed during my medication era. Aging contributed additional risk. Youth remained a secondary factor. The actual stroke event was triggered by a single episode of acute hypertension when my systolic blood pressure rose to 175 mmHg on 6/21/2025. From now on, my survival strategy is to carefully control daily blood pressure, stress, and monitor early warning indicators, such as the stroke risk trigger sensitivity index TSI values shown on my iPhone screen. If this knowledge can help me prevent another stroke and also help other patients understand their own risks, then these past 253 post-stroke days and the 232 stroke-related research papers will have been worthwhile. Epilogue: over the past 253 days following this stroke, I conducted an intensive investigation into my own stroke case. During this period, I wrote 258 research papers, most of them 230 papers related to stroke pathology, vascular physiology, blood pressure dynamics, and neurological recovery. My goal throughout this process was simple and focused: to find a scientific and reasonably accurate early warning signal for my future stroke risk. After many rounds of analysis and refinement, I developed the Stroke Risk Triggering Sensitivity Index C, despite its simplicity. The multiplication relationship between pulse pressure and systolic blood pressure amplifies the signal of both vascular stiffness and vascular stress, allowing TSI to function as a practical warning indicator. Those who know my personality understand that once I identify a critical problem, I do not give up until I understand the mechanism and find a practical solution. My goal has never been academic recognition, but to discover useful knowledge that may help save lives, including my own and potentially those of other patients facing similar risks. When someone studies a complex subject for a long time, the learning process usually follows several stages. 1. Long exploration phase. Many papers, many angles, and many attempts are made to understand the underlying mechanism. This stage is represented by my 230 stroke-related research papers. 2. Pattern recognition phase. Gradually, the pieces begin to connect. Cause, structure, trigger, and prevention mechanisms become clearer. 3. Compression phase. Once the stroke mechanism is truly understood, the explanation becomes shorter, simpler, and clearer. This process, or pattern, is very common in both science and engineering. The deeper the understanding becomes, the simpler final explanation often appears. Albert Einstein expressed a similar idea: if you cannot explain something simply, you do not understand it well enough. I believe my stroke research followed exactly this path. From 230 papers of exploration, to identifying the underlying mechanism, then compressing the findings into a final summary, and finally expressing the result in a simple explanation. For my stroke case, the mechanism can be summarized as long-term metabolic damage plus vascular stiffness plus acute hypertension as the trigger equals hemorrhagic stroke. This forms a very clear and simple model. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article belong to the author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.